Hi, my name is Chongo, and I'd like to welcome all of you to Anona Wellness. Hey Monadi, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really great to see you. How's it going?
It's going good. It's going good. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. We're happy to have you. And just to start things off, let's get to know you a little bit. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so my name is Monadi. I was born and raised in Ottawa. I actually grew up with Chongo from high school, and I've known her for quite some time. I went to the University of Ottawa and I studied communications, and I immediately started working like right after my degree, and that's kind of when I realized, I just wasn't passionate about what I was doing, and I just didn't really, kind of just felt lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and and then I kind of stumbled into fitness, and it was the first thing that I really gave my all to, and it really changed my life. And so now I'm pursuing being a trainer. I am a certified trainer now, but I'm pursuing that as a career, and it's pretty exciting. So
we're gonna get into that a little bit more later, but that's super cool. So in terms of your interests, in terms of hobbies, like what type of stuff do you like to do?
So I over the last few years, writing definitely has become a hobby. Doing like kind of poetry styled writing. I found that it really helped just get through traumatic experiences, and it was just a way for me to kind of release my emotions. I don't do it as much as I'd like to anymore, but I think writing was there when I needed it the most, and then fitness kind of took over. And so for me, like, fitness is a hobby for me now at this point. It's such a way for me to release my stress and kind of just put all of the day's work aside and just kind of dive in. It's where I feel like most in my element. So I mean, in terms of hobbies, like I would say like writing and fitness is probably the biggest things that I like to do.
What do you like to do for fun outside of hobbies?
I like to chill.
You know what?
Yeah. Honestly, sometimes you just get so busy that you don't really take, I really value time by myself, and I really value time that I can just relax. And if it's, watching Netflix, or if it's just taking a minute to just breathe, or if it's just taking some time to take care of myself in little ways, that's what I do. And I really look forward to that when I do have that time in my day.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. I think not enough people talk about it.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times we want to fill our times with things, but something I struggle with is I have to book time for me to spend time with myself, because I always put myself last, right? Yeah. So I love the fact that you can say that, and I think that's actually a very healthy hobby and thing to do for fun. Yeah. I actually think so.
Yeah, because I don't know. I just found it was getting increasingly harder to make that time, especially once I started getting more into fitness, and just trying to break up the time that you're at work, and then you have to go to the gym, or you have plans with your friends. I was just finding that it was so hard to just be alone. And for me, I really value that time, and so for me, honestly, if I know I have nothing to do after work, it's probably the best feeling ever. So,
for me, it's Friday nights. On Friday nights, I love to just go home and do nothing.
And it's kind of a dedicated time where you're okay, I know this day is for me, and it's, I don't know, it's just beautiful sometimes,
That's amazing. So I kind of went left with this interview, so I want to go back onto where I'm supposed to be with the questions. What does your typical day look like?
So for me, honestly, depending on the seasons, because to be honest, the winter is not my favorite time of year. And so I'll kind of coordinate my workout schedule accordingly, but if it's the winter, which is right now, I find working out in the mornings is what's the best for me, because I can get it out of the way, and I'll have the most motivation in the mornings to just go and do it. So I'll typically wake up 6:30, go to the gym, work out, And then I have work. So I'll go to work, do that. And then now that I'm a trainer, like I'm getting clientele, so it's going to consultations. I just started actually training, so sometimes it's client meetings. I like to go home and spend time with my family too. So that's also really valuable to me. And again, like if I'm not, hanging out with friends or seeing my parents, I'm literally at home doing nothing.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then weekends are usually reserved for me and Hussein. And we'll just spend the weekend together. We'll, run errands and do activities and stuff and just chill.
And Hussein is your boyfriend?
Yes, he's my boo thing.
She got a boo thing. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, that's awesome. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. I think a lot of us can relate to the kind of going to work grind and then having to, you know what I mean? There's all these like things that you have to take care of after that, but it's definitely nice to just go home and chill, and I feel like we need to talk about that more. So
I know. And honestly, like I feel like it was getting to a point where I was just getting too busy. Yeah. And it was just really messing with me. I just felt so cluttered and overwhelmed all the time. And it is a struggle. Like you just said, like when you have your 9-to-5 grind and you also want to do other stuff, or you have, these like side hustles, it can be really difficult to have the motivation to go after your 8-hour shift and go and do it, but like this is a passion for me and this is what I want to do. But then again, like sometimes you're overcompensating, right? And it can be hard to make that time, but yeah,
for sure. So what I find interesting about this time in our lives is that we're kind of at the point where we've graduated university and we're into the working world. And I find that at this time, our dreams and our hobbies and our dreams and our goals in life start to change. Yeah. So how have they kind of changed for you from, when you were in high school to now that you're actually working?
Yeah, that's a really good question. For me, in high school, I was like super involved. I was in like Link Crew, I was student council co-pres, I was just in it. Like I was in the school, everyone knew who I was, and for me, that was probably the first and last time I felt super motivated. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I just felt in my element. When I got to university, I was just thrown like curveball after curveball, and it was just like the 4 years that I spent in university, it felt like I blinked and I got nothing out of it. Because I was just so lost for like the whole time that I was in university. I was in a program that I enjoyed, but again, it was the typical, like, you're learning theory, you're reading from a textbook. It just wasn't, like, I don't know, it just wasn't fulfilling for me. And then, again, in my mind, I kept having that goal of, okay, once you're done university, get a job. And that was, like, make mom and dad proud, like, get a good job. It's, like, a huge thing, right? Especially, like, in our culture. It's just, like, you get into, your parents came to this country, they just want you to have a good job, they want you to go to school. So for me, like, that's what I grew up seeing, right? And so I was like, that's the focus. Yeah. And then I was lucky and fortunate enough to get a job right after university. But literally, I just felt like I just wasn't good at it. Like, I just didn't know what I was good at because I didn't know what my passion was, because I never really, I wasn't like, I don't know, like I didn't find my passion when I was in university. So when I got into the workforce, I was just, again, like in this tailspin, like I was just lost. And then like 2 years out of university, or maybe like a year and a half out of university, I started working out. And after meeting my boyfriend Hussein, like he's super into business, and that's always been his drive, and that's always been his focus, and that's always been his like goal in life, is to have his own business. And I never understood it. Like I never even understood the concept of having your own business and like just being an entrepreneur and whatever. But after university, that also started to become like the trend. Like more and more people were just like, screw this 9 to 5. Like I don't like it. Like I need to go and do my own thing. Yeah. So that coupled in with like obviously just seeing Hussein like go into real estate and start his own thing and pursue those ambitions, like it put things into perspective for me that life doesn't have to be a set way. And that's kind of when my goals started to shift, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I knew the trajectory, like I knew where I was headed, but I didn't know Like, what is my purpose? Like, what is that business gonna be, or what is it, like, you know, what's gonna come of this? But I just knew, like, you know what, the reason I'm so mediocre at my job, the reason that I hate waking up in the mornings to go to work is because it's not for me, you know? And like, a lot of people strive in that environment, that's great, but for me, I was just like, there's too many negatives that I'm feeling. Yeah. And to force this isn't going to solve anything, right?
No, exactly.
So then obviously, like, when I started fitness, it was like a hobby, and it was just something that I started because I wanted to just get healthy and like battle some of my insecurities. And then it became like, I became that friend who, you know, helped with fitness, and like I was becoming that person that everyone came to for advice and things like that. And I remember earlier this year, my friend, like, I took her to the gym, and I had like a session with her where I was teaching her how to train. And I remember coming home telling myself, like, this is it. Like, this is what I want to do, because I felt so fulfilled from just like that one, like, you know, a few hours just like in the gym with someone else. Like, it was just like that moment for me where I was like, hey, this is what I want to do. And then like fast forward to the end of the year, and now like I am a certified trainer, so that's kind of where I'm headed now, and that's where I envision myself. So yeah, like I think that it was a lot of just being lost, but then chasing the feeling that I had in high school, you know, like knowing that I'm not in the place that I want to be, because I know the feeling, you know, of what it's like to be good at something. I know what it feels like to be passionate about something. And all of university into my working career, I was just like, this is not it. Like, this, like, nothing feels right. And nothing was sparking, you know, me going out of my way to like do something that I cared about, because I didn't know what I cared about, right? Yeah. So it was a lot of just being lost for a very long time. And you know what, like, to a certain extent, like, I'm still lost. I'm still trying to navigate my way, but I feel like finally I have a starting point again, you know?
And that's really important, I think, to bring up, because I think everybody and a lot of people that I talk to kind of at this stage also feel very lost. Yeah. And I think that's a feeling that doesn't go away, especially when you're trying to find that thing that gives you passion. And I think I've definitely experienced the same thing, where there's been a point where I've been like, wow, I'm really passionate about this thing, and then I also, when I graduated, I kind of lost it, and I felt very lost for a very long time. But it's once you've experienced it, you're like, I can't live like this. Exactly. I need to figure out how to get back to that point. Exactly. And I really like the fact that you were persistent with it, and it's a process, right? Because so many people must look at you now and say, wow, she's a personal trainer, like she's
when did that happen?
She's got her life together. She looks great. If you've not seen her Instagram, you guys can go see her Instagram, and we'll plug it. But people will look at your Instagram, they'll look at these things, and they'll think, oh my God, like, she's doing everything that I want to be doing, but they don't see that it took you such a long time to get here. And I think it's important to have discussions like that, because we're all kind of lost. So,
100%. And that's why, like, I also said, like, I'm still lost. Like, I still don't 100% know, because, like, you know, I'm a personal trainer, but I might end up, like, not liking it in a few years. You know, like, it's like there's no end really to goals, and like you're constantly in a state of evolution and change, right? Like, you're constantly experiencing different things. And so so for me, it's like right now it feels like, okay, like, maybe this is a good place that I'm in, and I can start building. But it took a very long time, and that's the thing that's like, on Instagram and social media, like, everyone says it, right? Like, you see the highlights, so it's like no one talks about anything, and then it's like, boom, like it's like, you know, like mic drop, like, I have a business, or I'm doing this, or whatever. But like, no one sees the hustle behind the scenes. And honestly, like, I appreciate what you said, like, being persistent, because like, I never would have realized my passion for fitness if I hadn't stayed persistent with it. And I didn't even start with the intention of, like, I'm going to be a trainer one day, this is it. And I didn't force that, right? It was never even in my mind to, like, I'm going to become a trainer one day. It was just like, I need to change, like, you know, my habits. I want to become healthier. I want to become fitter. I want to be strong. And then that started translating to, like, okay, I really enjoy this. Like, can I make a career out of it? You know, but yeah.
There's a really successful YouTuber that I really like. Her name is Patricia Bright.
Yes.
And she kind of started in accounting and, you know what I mean, and consulting, and now she's a beauty blogger. And what she always says is sometimes you just have to do something that feels right and you don't know where it's going to go. Yeah. And that's what she did. She just kept doing things that felt cool, and then now she's got businesses, she's got it all set up. But it's kind of just like, oh, this feels okay, and then it kind of leads to the next thing, and it leads.
Exactly.
And I think that's kind of what life is like, just taking shots in the dark, but pointed shots.
Yeah, pointed shots, yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's also knowing what you have control over in your life, you know? Like, there's a lot of things that, you know, we might not be able to change in the moment, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, you know, we all might have to work 40 hours a week because we need money, we have bills to pay and whatever. But the things that we do have control over, you know, you have to kind of keep that in mind, you know, have that mindset of like, what can I control in my life, and how can I affect that change, you know? And so for me, like, fitness was that, like, it was in my life at the time, it was the one thing that I knew, like, you have control over this. Mm-hmm. If you just stick to it and you're like disciplined enough, it'll lead you somewhere, right?
Exactly.
So
I'm looking forward to see how everything comes together, you know, because it's kind of like the beginning of something. So
it is.
Yeah, it is. But it just shows you how things change.
Yeah.
So our next topic is culture.
Yeah.
So, do you want to actually give a little bit of background as to what your background is culturally?
Yeah, sure. So I'm from Canada. Like, I was born and raised here. Mm-hmm. My family is from Bangladesh. Mm-hmm. And so all of my siblings and my parents, like, they're born there. So I guess, like, my ethnicity is I'm Bangladeshi. Mm-hmm. But I'm from Canada.
Of course, it's kind of
it's odd because it's like, well, I was born here, but I guess, you know, like, I'm Bengali.
So just a question in terms of how much you relate to your Bengali culture, so how much do you relate to that, and how in tune do you feel like you are with that side of you?
Probably not a lot, to be honest. I do want to be more in tune with my culture. But I think, like, growing up, it was hard for me. Like, I feel like when I was younger, I would see, like, people getting made fun of because of their ethnicity. You know, I would see people kind of thinking, like, if, you know, we had, like, an Asian person come to school and they had, like, rice and chicken and, like, curry, you know, they'd get made fun of, or, like, all the other people would be like, oh, like, what's that smell? And so I started from a very young age kind of trying to disassociate myself from my culture, and just trying to just fit in, you know, like, that was my only goal. And, like, it was like bringing sandwiches to lunch, or, like, bringing snacks that, like, everyone knew, and, like, you know, it's like, oh, like, I have a snack pack too, or I have Dunkaroos, like, that's cool. But like, as I got older, I started to appreciate my culture more, mostly because my siblings were super into, like, Bollywood and all that kind of stuff, like, my sister especially. And my sister would always be listening to, like, Bollywood music, and she'd always be, like, watching Bollywood movies. And because of that, we also, like, would listen and, you know, watch movies and stuff. And I think from there, like, I started to kind of grow an appreciation for it, like, just that I am from a different country, and that I'm different, and that I'm not, like, you know, I'm not, like, you know, I am from Canada, but, like, I have a different background, right?
And it's almost a side to you that deserves to be on display as well.
Exactly. And and then I kind of just started realizing, like, you know, being in Canada, you don't have to pick one side, you know, you don't have to just, you know, pick, like, I'm gonna be westernized, and I'm gonna turn a blind eye to my culture, and, like, that's it. But and then, like, I think in university I joined like a South Asian dance organization, and I was, like, part of, like, the logistics team. But in that environment, I think that was when I fully just became proud of who I was, and, like, proud of my background, proud that I was, like, from it, like, my parents were immigrants, I'm an immigrant, like, it just felt like my culture makes sense to me now, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I just felt so proud that I had this, you know? And it was the first time, like, I really felt like displaying that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, taking pictures in cultural clothing and posting that and saying, like, and just being prideful, like, that this is mine, you know?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so I think, yeah, that was probably, it was always a struggle. It was kind of a battle when I was younger. But, yeah.
I think as you grow up, you also start to meet other people who are similar to you.
Yes.
And seeing them be so proud of it can also kind of, because it's harder when you're younger, you can't really choose the school you're in, and that can impact things a lot.
Yeah.
I think, so I think a lot of people can relate to that and can relate to being confused when they're younger. And I feel, and this kind of segues into our next topic, but I feel like there's a lot of pressure, especially as somebody who's kind of like, you kind of feel like you have one foot in one culture and one foot in another.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, but then you're like, I feel this pressure to assimilate with Western culture.
Yes.
So how do you feel in terms of that? Like, do you feel, and you kind of touched on it, but do you feel like you've assimilated with Western culture? And on top of that, do you feel like your family has assimilated with Western culture? Because there can kind of be like a little duality going on there, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think that I have. Like, I think I have assimilated. But I think my family has come a long way.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way. Like, I think that they've come a long way. I don't think that, you know, I can 100% say like my parents have completely assimilated with like Western culture, and to be honest, like it's not even fair for them to. Like, they spent so much of their life back home. They grew up with so many traditions, and coming here, like the fact that, you know, like even small things like dating people and not having like an arranged marriage, or you know, just like small things like that can be like a struggle for any immigrant, you know. And like, especially like from a South Asian background, like I still know parents that, you know, are very forceful of like their kids like doing a certain, like being a certain way, that kind of fits in with the culture from back home. And so so in those aspects, like I would say like my parents have definitely changed, because they understand like we're here now, and that's not the way like this culture kind of, you know, like works. And I also appreciate that they see the struggle that we go through, right? Like they've seen how difficult it is as kids to grow up in a Western culture, like you said, like having one foot in, one foot out, having to go to school with like, you know, a diverse group of people that come from different backgrounds, and then having to learn those things and adapting and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that like even for my siblings, I think that they have, but it's tough. Like I think my sister had a harder time because she was the eldest, and you know, when she was being brought up with very traditional, in a very traditional way, because, you know, they first came to Canada and my sister was, you know, maybe 10 or 11, and so it was very different, right? And so for her, I feel like she held on to those cultures and traditions the longest, and kind of instilling that on me, like when I was younger, right? Like the curfews, you know, not being able to go out or have like certain freedoms, because she didn't, right? And she didn't really understand like things do change over time.
Of course.
And now it's all good, right? But I think, I think my sister definitely, like, it took the longest for her just because of the way that she was brought up. And then by the time, like, I was, you know, growing up and stuff like that, my parents had already been through, like, three kids of, like, rebelling and, like, you know, putting their foot down about certain things because they grew up, they're growing up here. They're like, what do you mean I can't, like, do these things, you know? Like, this is normal for people that live here, you know? And so by the time, like, I was growing up, my parents were a lot more like, yeah, it's just normal. Like, you can just go, like, do your thing, you know? But yeah, I would say for myself, like, it was hard. Like, it was definitely always, like, a pull. And, like, I think that's also why it took me longer to, like, really, like, have pride in my culture, because there was such a pull. Like, I wanted to do so many things that I would see, like, you know, me getting shit on for. Like, it was just, like, so many things that I would get yelled at for, and it was like, these are normal things that you do here. Like, why is the culture so backwards, or why this doesn't make any sense to me? But yeah.
And it definitely, it's something that takes time to build up, I think.
Yeah.
And it's kind of how it is, I guess, like, especially if you come from a family where, because it's kind of similar for me as well, where I wasn't born in this country. Mm-hmm. We immigrated here. Yeah. And, you know, it's kind of like, it's just different, right? Because your family does have to get used to, like, a different culture, and you can't expect them to fully come, you know, 180, right?
Exactly.
Like it takes a lot of time. So it's definitely one of those things where I feel like a lot of people feel that. It's like it's getting better.
Yeah.
So
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So that kind of concludes our general portion of this interview. So now that we're in the wellness portion of this interview, the first question that I have for you is, what do you think of when you think wellness, and what does it mean to you?
Okay. So I'll answer this in two parts. I used to think wellness meant like taking care of yourself physically. Yeah. And being kind to your body, you know, feeding it well, working out, all that kind of stuff. And I also thought of it as like, oh, like, do you have little spa days for yourself, you know, like taking care of yourself in that way, like doing your nails, your hair, like all that kind of stuff I always associated with like, oh, I'm taking care of myself, that's wellness. Mm-hmm. But obviously, like, as time went on, I got a little bit older, and I started doing things like therapy and meditation and all that kind of stuff. I started to realize like wellness is so much deeper than that. Mm-hmm. It's so much deeper than what you're doing physically to your body. It's taking care of your mind. Yeah. You know, and our minds are so complex. There's so many layers to what we've been through. Every experience that we've gone through like shapes us, and we're a creation of our circumstances in life, you know? Yeah. And again, like something that I've just learned through doing therapy and dealing with, you know, my own like mental health issues and things like that is just like, if you don't resolve one thing that happens to you, it just keeps building, and it just gets to a point where it starts releasing in such unhealthy ways. Yeah. And so for me now, wellness means a completely different thing. It means, you know, how deeply are you thinking about yourself? How deeply are you thinking about the experiences that you've been through? You know, are you taking the time to sit with yourself and allow yourself to talk about these things with people that you feel comfortable with, people that you're safe with, you know? And it's really treating your mind in the way that you would want to treat your body, you know? So,
yeah, I think that was a great answer, and I think for a lot of reasons. I think a lot of people do think, am I healthy? Am I physically healthy when they hear wellness? And that is a portion of it, but there's a whole other range of things. Yeah. And sometimes it is more than just taking a spa day. Sometimes it really is digging deep into yourself, and I think not enough people look at that. No. Right? I also think a lot of people think wellness means happiness. I think the two can it can lead to a happier life maybe, but it's really taking care of yourself and making sure that you're addressing those emotions. And I think
and I love what you say, like it's not happy, like you know what I mean, like truly, you know, digging deep is pretty hard, like it's terrifying. You know, it's honestly terrifying. Yeah. Like the things that you realize, or the things that you have to face. Like you have to face your biggest fears when you're diving really, really deep into your mind, you know? And it's hard.
Exactly.
You know? So it's not an easy thing, and that's why people avoid it, right? People don't want to have to think about traumas they've experienced and things that they've gone through because it's just too painful. But it's like, if you really want to treat your mind well and be able to release from those things, like it does have to take that extra layer, you know?
And I definitely, I think it's almost it's doing things now that almost help you develop healthier coping mechanisms, right? Yes. So it doesn't mean if you engage in these activities, when you're done, you'll be happy.
No,
but it's it's like life is going to happen to you regardless of what happens. But as things come up, there are healthier ways to deal with certain things. Yes. And I think that's what wellness can really help you figure out. Yeah. So I really like that answer actually. So the next question I have for you is, do you think that wellness and wellness associated activities are well understood and accepted within your culture and your community? So kind of like family, friends, all of that. And I also want to ask you about your experience with therapy and how that's kind of tied and whether there's been any,
Yeah, for sure.
Culturally.
So...
It was a loaded question.
Yeah.
Let's start with the first part.
Wellness in our culture doesn't exist, to be very honest. Like, it's not something, mental health, talking about your feelings, like, it's not something that comes up organically, you know? And it's just, like, growing up, like, if you were feeling sad or if you were, like, suffering from insomnia and you couldn't sleep, it was like, what's the solution? Like, just stop thinking. Like, you know what I'm like? It's like, just go to sleep. Like, what are you tripping about? Like, that's literally like...
Oh, you're anxious?
Yeah.
Just don't be stressed.
What do you have to be stressed about? Like, you have a roof over your head. You got food in the fridge. What are you depressed about? You know? Like, those are the answers that you get, you know? And it's obviously... It's not our parents' fault because, like, that's how they were brought up.
Yeah.
And so, so, like, growing up, there was... No, like, wellness didn't exist. You know? It was like... Huh? You know, like maybe writing in your journal for me, like it was like a thing, only because my sister did.
And I feel like that was very unique to you. Like I would have never thought to write in a journal at that age. That's actually really impressive.
But it's because my sister used to write in a diary, and I like did the same. But like wellness wasn't a thing. You know, it wasn't like and again, it was more physically focused. You know, it was like. Go outside and run, like that's good for you, like you'll be healthy, like go do that because it's good for your health. But there was never anything that like touched on like how complex our minds are and taking care of our mental health as well. And like I think that, for cultures it's really like the kids who kind of introduce that to the parents, like For us, it was like having to go through traumatic experiences and like, dealing with mental health on such an escalated level that it was like, okay, now you can't ignore it, and it's like, I feel like it's the same for a lot of immigrant households where it gets to a point where, someone is suffering with mental health and then it becomes like, you just can't ignore it because like the signs are it's just too much, right? And then that's when I think a conversation gets started where it's like, okay, well, there are these things that exist, like there is anxiety, this is what it is. There is a depression, this is what it is, like, and then it's, obviously there's a lot more, but, that's how the conversation gets started. And so, so now it's like, even for my family, it's like, doing therapy and meditation and things like that, that's a very normal thing,
that's very amazing.
Where it's like, if I'm doing therapy, I'm like, I have therapy today, like I'm going like bye, but obviously that's taken a lot of time and a lot of hurdles, right, and a lot of challenges to get there, which does suck because I feel like if it was something we talked about more earlier on, it just would have created a healthier space for all of us to just, be aware of the things that we were experiencing ourselves, like I didn't know I had anxiety for years, but I was experiencing all the symptoms from when I was like, probably like 10, So it's like, it's crazy to think like I've had this majority of my life, didn't know what it was, couldn't even talk about it because it was like, it's just a feeling that I had. I just was like, well, I guess everyone feels this way,
It's like, oh, maybe not.
It's like, why do I always think about the worst case scenario in every situation? Like, it's just like so many things that's like, like typically you don't really, you don't really have those thoughts. So anyway, so like obviously a lot of education and a lot of like just becoming more aware was that step. To be like, like these things exist,
and I definitely feel like the one hurdle, like it exists in my culture, like Zambian, and exists in a lot of cultures, is a lot of the times like we're prided a lot on being strong, right? And it's like, because even our parents, it's like they felt these things too and they feel them, but it's like in the culture, it's like, if you're feeling something, you keep it inside. Like we're all struggling. Exactly. I struggled too. This person struggled. We're all struggling. But what the result of that is as you start to grow up, like at least for me, and I know for a lot of other people, when you grow up, it you're not as able to kind of talk about things or release emotions in a healthy way, right? And that can kind of impact you in your relationships later on. And I think it really impacts us here in this Western society where it's all about getting your emotions out, right?
Yes,
so I think it's
so confusing.
different. Exactly. It's
no,
tough,
and I really like that you brought that up, because like from a young age you're like prided on not crying, and you're told like, oh, you're so tough, like you don't even like something as small as like, oh, we're gonna go get a shot, like it's like, like the needle's going in, and if you cry you're like a baby, and if you don't you're like so strong, and it's like, and obviously it's especially worse for men, but it's like, for culturally, it's really tough, and like we don't see our parents be emotional, and that also affect, you know what I mean? Like it hugely affects how we perceive emotion, right? Because it's like, well, we didn't see this growing up, so that's not normal, right? Or like we like, you look up to your parents, you're like, if I want to be like them, I can't.
Exactly.
Or in other circumstances, like you just get shit on for being emotional, right? Or like, you'll try to be emotional, you'll try to have that space, and then your parents will like shut you down, or
it's rejected,
or it's rejected. So then now all of a sudden you have all this pent-up emotion that you're suppressing, and then you won't release it, like,
and it comes out, and that's where the problems start, because it comes out in other ways that are much more unhealthy. Because I always wonder, I'm like, I love to cry, like I cry all the time, right? I don't know, I remember I think it was when I was sitting down with my therapist this way, like I went to therapy for a bit, and I was sitting down with her, and she's like, why don't you just cry? And I'm like, oh, is that okay? And she's like, it's a very healthy way to release emotion. Yeah. And ever since, like, man, I just cry. Like, I cry all the time. Like, sometimes a song will just play, and I'm like, oh, here I am in my car.
I am.
But it's great. Like, it's awesome, and it's unfortunate that it has a negative connotation a lot of times when it doesn't.
And I find with the negative connotation, like, what I'm starting to realize, sometimes it's for selfish reasons. Do you know what I mean? Like, what I'm gonna explain it. Like, sometimes I see, like, for example, my mom, when we start crying, she'll keep telling us, like, don't cry, right? And it's coming from a place of, like, don't cry. Like, it's coming from a place of love, but it's selfish. And the reason it's selfish is because it hurts her to see us cry. But she doesn't understand that it's beneficial for us to cry. To have that connection with a parent or with a sibling or a friend, to have that space where you can just release it, and then to just be like told, like, shut up, like stop. I'm never gonna cry with you again. You know what I mean? But it's like, it's coming from a place of like, it's hard for me to see you like this, and I don't want to.
It's uncomfortable. It's discomfort.
But it's like, they don't realize that it's actually such a special moment. Yeah. That you're being vulnerable in front of your dad, your mom, your siblings. That it's not something you get to see every day. And when you do, like, the best thing you can do is just comfort them and be there for them. So it's just like, I just find, like, especially like culturally, like everything that is done, there's always like this doesn't benefit me, or like this feels hard for me, so I don't want to see it, or I don't want to see you guys do it, you know? But it's like, again, like, who is that benefiting, right?
Of course.
Yeah. So I don't know. So just a little tidbit.
No, and it's definitely an experience a lot of people can relate to, I think. Yeah. So in terms of wellness activities, and you've kind of touched on a few, what do you typically engage in? Like, what would you say that you do relating to the wellness space? And I think you do a lot, just based on what you've explained so far.
So I mean, and I don't obviously do all of those things consistently. Like, I go through my phases where, like, writing will work for me for a certain amount of time, but then writing seems to kind of be ineffective, or then I move on to like meditation, and I think over the last year it's been a lot of like trial and error, where it's kind of like seeing what works, seeing what doesn't. The things that I would say, like, I consistently engage in is trying my best to write, like if I'm really down, or if I'm really feeling, a lot of emotion, like I'll just write like whatever it is that's in my mind. And and I'm like really impatient too. So like writing sometimes like feels like, if I'm like writing a whole story, it just feels like too much time. Which is why I think poetry worked really well for me, because I was able to just like write like 3-word lines and that would be it. You know what I mean? I'd be like, that's good. Like I got it all out and I understand what I'm saying, you know? So doing things like that, and then meditation was a big thing for me as well, like that I started doing. And just kind of clearing my mind and getting to that like state of relaxation within myself where I wasn't really thinking about much. I started hypnotherapy as well, which was also really cool. And that was really, I think that was probably the most like effective for me. Like it just allowed me to just be in the state where I just wasn't, like I was just at peace. Like I just wasn't thinking about anything. I was just relaxed, you know, like I was in my mind the least. And it was just like really cool to just experience that. But and then I do therapy as well, like allowing myself to kind of talk about things and get explanation for why we do the things that we do. And I think for me, like I have a tendency to like be my own therapist. Like when I'm like day to day, when I'm like doing things, I'll be like, I'll always analyze what I'm doing, and I think that also helps me a lot. Just because I'm starting to kind of get into the pattern of understanding like everything we do with intention, right? There's a reason behind everything that we do. So tracing it back in my mind to why I would do something like that or why I would say this kind of helps, because it's like it allows me to see like, oh, why am I really pissed off today? What about this moment is making me upset, you know? And then it allows me to kind of go back and say like, oh, well, maybe this is, like I had a bad experience with this, and like, you know, and so it just kind of allows me to get some insight on why. And then from there you can kind of figure out like, you know, these are the reasons, and now I can kind of mitigate those feelings a little. But I think that those are the biggest things that I've definitely taken part in that have helped me the most, for sure.
And honestly, that's very commendable. It takes a lot to be able to look within yourself and to be able to recognize it. Like even just analyzing why you do the things you do day to day, like that's a really hard thing to do.
It's tough. But I will say
great
like
that you do it.
And I will say therapy was the trigger. Like
it helped
you know, having someone explain those habits and explain those feelings like helped me understand myself on a very much deeper level, right? It was like, oh, that makes sense, you know? Like everything was just like, oh, like okay, like this isn't like random, like this isn't like a random behavior, like it's rooted somewhere.
Exactly.
Right? And so that kind of created that dialogue within myself.
No, and it's important to realize that. Are there any activities associated with wellness that you haven't tried, or that just like there's either been barriers to it for you, or you're just like, I'm just, you know, it hasn't worked for you? Has there been anything like that?
Can you give me some examples of like wellness activities?
So like yoga as an example.
Yeah, I was gonna say
I'm trying to think of others. Like stuff like that.
I would say, I think yoga was probably the biggest thing that I've wanted to try. That I've always felt like I've been at a crossroads with. And for a couple reasons. Like one, I think for the longest time I didn't even realize yoga was for wellness. Like I didn't realize the benefits of yoga and how much how much healing you can experience through yoga. I never knew. And then I think it was honestly like when you started yoga, that's when I was like, oh, like it's not just like a physical thing, you know, it's like so like you guys do breathing and like all the movements you do, like there's intention. So I definitely just didn't know the benefits. And then again, like I feel like the demographic of yoga like that I would see, it was just very limiting. And so I didn't see myself represented, you know, within the yoga community. And like it's also very expensive, like in most places and that's also a huge barrier. Like when you're a student or, you know, you're in high school, whatever, like it's not something that you can always easily afford, you know. And again, like culture plays a huge role as well, right? It's like if in your culture, you know, your parents are like, you know, what is yoga? Like, why do you want to spend like $200 doing yoga? It can also be like, oh, you know, like you can also feel that rejection a little. So yeah, so I think like there was a lot of reasons why I never really found myself in yoga.
Yeah.
But I think after you started doing it,
Mm-hmm.
I started realizing the benefits, and it was always something that I wanted to try. But again, it was always like so expensive that I was like, can I commit?
Yeah,
to spending this much money a month to do it, on top of like having a gym pass and all that kind of stuff. So yeah.
And I think a lot of the times, like, did you know that meditation is a form of yoga? Because I find it's very interesting. Like, people like meditation, they're like, yeah, like meditation, I'm all about it. But I'm like, guys, like that's one piece of it,
right? Because you guys do a lot of breathing within yoga.
And exactly, and it's literally like, I feel like people think a lot of the physical when they think yoga, but that's actually just one aspect of it.
Right.
But it's got so many different aspects to it, right? But I find it's just a very misunderstood thing a lot of the time. And then with the representation, like you said, like there's just a lot of reasons, like there's a lot of barriers there. But but that's really interesting, and I think a lot of people can relate to what you said. In a perfect world, and this is our last question.
Okay.
So in a perfect world, what wellness activities do you think you'd like to see more of in your community, in other communities? Yeah. Or what do you think maybe there's a stigma behind that you wish kind of like, you know, it could be more easily accessible, more,
Honestly, I think therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Like therapy and crying, like just being able to have a space for that, because it's just, I just see so many men in my life that struggle with this so much, and it creates so many barriers, and it's like, it's also really difficult, like for women, right, when they're in a relationship or when they're with like a partner who can't express themselves, who is unable to do that. And you know, I find that again, like we kind of get pulled into these stereotypical roles of like, oh, the woman's crazy, she's always yelling, or she's doing this and that, when really it's like we're kind of at a loss, because if you can't be emotional with us, then what is this, right? Or what is there to, so I just find like it just creates this like dynamic that's just so hard to break out of. And I find like men again associate crying and being emotional to not being strong and not being you know, like living up to their role in life. And so like, I don't know, I just think therapy is also something that guys kind of steer away from, or they're kind of like, oh, I don't need that, you know, like I don't need to go and do that kind of stuff. But I think it's so, like, I just find it's so hard for people to talk about their problems in general, like
it is
across the board. It's so difficult. But couple that in with people who have just been suppressing their emotions their whole life. And so I just think like, if especially in our culture, you know, if that was something that was more like, you know, like everyone kind of doing it, or it was kind of like
just normalized.
It was just normalized. You know, if you did experience some kind of trauma or hardship, you would just be like, yeah, okay, I'm just gonna go to therapy, you know, or like I'm just gonna go and like meditate, or you know, figure this out.
It's actually crazy. So a good friend of mine is a therapist, and she actually told me that quite a few of her male patients actually have asked her out, or kind of developed feelings for her. And she told me she thinks a big reason for that is because men usually don't open up to people aside from their partners. Right. So a lot of the times they'll associate that with, you know. So I don't know if that's a thing or if it's backed up, but yeah, she experienced that a lot. And
that's so interesting.
So it's really sad, because especially culturally, I feel like for me it's like, don't open up, but like I've been in situations like, I remember we had a traumatic family event, and my cousin, he was crying, and my, like, you know, my family was like, stop crying, like stay strong. And I'm like, like, you know, it's hard, right? Like it's definitely like, if that's what you're brought up on, like it's hard to shake that. So I definitely think normalizing these things, normalizing emotions, like it'd definitely be great to have.
And I think also like just like becoming more aware about emotions, right? Like or creating more of a capacity to know about emotional intelligence, and like kind of educating ourselves in that regard as well. Because it's like, like I just see like so many people who are not okay. They're not doing well, and like they just refuse to do anything. You know, and it's so hard to shake that. It's so hard to you know, you can't always be the voice of reason, like, and just being like, oh, you know, like, this is how it is and you should do it, because it's like, if it's in their head, it's been ingrained there for so many years that you can't, like, one person can't just come in and like, sometimes it's not enough, you know? So I feel like, again, if it's like more of a societal thing, it's more of a cultural thing, then you have that extra push, right? That will help you. But yeah, I mean, like, anything that you do in terms of wellness is going to help you. But I think, like, I think normalizing just talking, you know, having that ability to just be upfront about what you're going through, what you're feeling, and not getting like shut down for it. I think is probably the biggest thing. No,
I think that's very important. I think that's very true. Well, that was our last question, and thank you so much for all of your insights. It's been an amazing conversation, and honestly, a lot of the stuff you said, like, I have to echo and reiterate, like, it was really important, and I think a lot of people think about these things, but you don't always actively think about them. So I think you brought a lot of context, and I really hope that a lot of the things that you talked about are something that we can see more throughout people, right? Like, especially in communities of people of color and immigrants, because I think it's important stuff, and like, some of us are kind of here and some of us are there, and it's just important to see different people doing these things.
100%.
So we will be concluding with one final game.